Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Michele Eich, and this is my book, How to Kill an Addiction, Recovery with God. In this book, I talk about how to break free from anything that's holding you back with God's help, as well as 20 powerful testimonies of real people who have done just that. So I'd love it if you check it out. But every week, I interview somebody who has overcome a life-controlling issue, and this week, my guest is Shane. Shane, welcome to Voices of Recovery.
Thank you so much, Michele. It's so excited to be here. I really appreciate your time and all of the viewers. I'm so excited to be sharing this time with you.
I am so excited to have you because I just finished your book and we're definitely going to be talking about that today. But first, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Yes, so my name is Svorec. I have lived all over the country, but I currently reside in New Jersey with my husband of almost 20 years, my 3 children, my 2 rescue dogs, and chickens. I am very involved in my community because I believe in giving back, and I think that, we all are here for a reason and for a purpose, and service is a big part of that. So I'm very busy between writing, between my job. I am the president of our local board of education, and I'm involved with our church and numerous other things. But it's, I believe, part of why we are here and we're all needed to make things better.
I absolutely agree with that. And I appreciate your time because you are such a busy gal. But we're going to be talking about your book today. So if you could hold up your book, it's called Broken Little Believer, Finding Purpose in All the Pretty Painful Pieces. And I love the cover of it. It is just, the cover is perfect, really.
Thank
The
you.
VW bus, the little girl in the front, and so incredible. And I loved it.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about that today. Yes.
Thank
you. Absolutely. So the book is kind of a metaphor of a road trip.
Yes.
So I love the VW bus, right? Going on a trip. And it really is a journey. Our life is a journey, definitely highs and lows, good and bad.
Yep.
God is with us all along the way. Sometimes we recognize it, sometimes we don't. But your book is interactive. So you have an opportunity for the reader to journal a little bit at the end of every chapter. Talk a little bit about that if you could.
So when I wrote this book, it's been pieces that I have written throughout my life. Traveling a lot for work, I would be on a plane and I would just write. It was during COVID when I always say the world was upside down, and it's still a little upside down, and it's trying to find its way back. That I decided it was time to publish this book, and so the reason why I set it up as a journey and the way that I wrote it, I grew up in a Volkswagen bus. I traveled the country as a little girl, living in a VW bus. At the time, I didn't know how incredible it was. I appreciated it, and I found it to be a huge adventure. But it wasn't until later in life that I recognized how incredibly blessing, what an incredible blessing it was for me to have that opportunity, because I was exposed to so many different areas of our great country. I met so many amazing people, and some not so amazing, but it all brought me to my destination and where I am now. But more importantly, you were asking, why I wrote it the way that I did. I didn't want it just to be about me. I wanted people to begin this book as though they were being invited to kind of hop in. And at that time, as a little girl, hitchhiking was a big thing. That's how people got to places. They didn't have gas, they didn't have a car, and they would just hitchhike to the next stop. So it brought me back, and I decided, I'm going to let these readers in this Volkswagen bus with me. And it kind of also takes the pressure off of the reader to put their life on the line, for them to expose themselves. They're able to sit back and just enjoy and sometimes process the journey and see through my eyes and through the back of the Volkswagen bus things that maybe they've been exposed to, they've been hurt by, things that they've endured. So I wanted to write it as they were going to be the passenger, and they could be as active as they wanted to be. But at the end of each chapter, I felt it was important for, just like going on a road trip, we all need to stop at the rest stop. We've got to use the restroom. We have to stretch our legs. We need to kind of, pause and take that break. And so after every chapter, there's a break. And it's an invitation for readers to reflect on maybe something they learned, maybe something that resonated with them, maybe something that brought back pain that they've been burying. So I found it, and then I set it to a playlist, as you know. Each chapter is the name of a song. And so there's a Spotify playlist that goes with it, because no road trip is, complete without music.
Oh, absolutely.
So I really tried to make it truly a road trip that you can escape. But while you're away, because it's during vacation and when we're away, that we have that quietness to be able to remember and reflect on those things that sometimes we get too busy to reflect on.
That's so good, Shane. And just talking about a journey, a lot of times we're all about the destination.
Yes.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Instead of really enjoying the moments along the way. And that's so true about life.
Right.
Well, I'm going to just read an example for our listeners. You talk a lot about baggage checks and things like that at the end of each chapter. Here's a question that you asked. Has there ever been a time you've carried someone else's luggage and the weight of it became unbearable? Have you been able to put it down and let it go? Have you ever mistaken someone else's luggage as your own? That's so good. And it's like that question of reflection made me stop and think, wow, yes, I have done that. And you can kind of process that with God. And that's why I love these questions. Instead of just reading it, you're really interacting with it. And then you mentioned the playlist. I mean, one of my favorites is Piece by Piece, the Idol version of Kelly Clarkson.
Yes.
I felt that song in every fiber of my being. That song really, really spoke to me, because I experienced rejection from my father. And I just, that song was incredible. And she was singing it to her husband, but for me, I was singing it to God, because he's the one who never left. So I loved it. It was just such a fun and unique way of taking the people on a journey with you and processing, getting rid of some baggage. We all need to do that,
Sure. Yeah. And I also believe, I shouldn't say I believe, I know that everyone learns and processes things different. So for some, reading something that's enough. For others, they need to apply it and stop and kind of reflect, and they need to write things down. And for others, they listen, and we know that music can transport us right back to a moment, to an experience, to a feeling. So I really tried to do the Dolby effect of a road trip.
Right.
So
that's amazing. And we don't need 8-track players anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So good. Well, Shane, you share a lot in the book about some different things that happened in your childhood. And as you said, some were great, some not so great. Would you take a moment and maybe pick one that stood out to you that really impacted you and the person that you are today?
I would say that one of the things, and it just jumped out at me. So I do believe that, I started this interview by saying, I want God to be at the center of my heart, at the front of my mind, and at the tip of my tongue. And I believe that, we just sometimes have to be quiet and let him, speak through us, and him deliver the message that maybe someone here needs to hear. So thank you for prompting me, but me being able to just answer the question as I'm feeling called to.
Yes.
So your question, it just popped into my mind, and this is not an example that I talk about often, but clearly I'm supposed to. We were living in San Francisco, and I was just a young girl. I'm going to say I was 10 at the time. my mother and stepfather were going through a terrible, terrible time. And my mother had recovered from a illness that was thought to be terminal. She was not expected to live. And I was very independent as a young person. My mother depended on me to do a lot of things, as most people do. You know, the daughters
Sure.
kind of tend to do a little more of, you know, the responsible work. I'm not trying to stereotype, but the oldest, and I was a girl, and I just kind of helped my mom a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We had a cat, a rescue cat, and the cat's name was Dolphin. It was a Siamese cat, and the cat was sick. Dolphin wasn't feeling well. And my mom had to go to work. My stepfather wasn't with us at the time. They were separated because they were going through a difficult period. And she said, you have to take Dolphin to the vet on your way to school. And, you know, it sounds so foreign to me now as a mother. Like, I can't imagine, because a lot of our kids don't really walk to school these days either. But
Right.
here I was in San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
and I was walking a pretty significant distance from my house to school. And I'm walking carrying a pet carrier with my cat in it. And I had to bring the cat to the vet before I went to school.
Wow.
As I was walking, there was a woman who was up ahead of me, and I was walking fast because I had a lot to do before I got to school. And as I passed her, I turned and I smiled, and she smiled back at me. That simple smile turned into a long conversation from the moment we met all the way to the vet. I think she walked me there. And she told me, here I was just a little girl, but she was telling me how she was not expected to live and that she had cancer. And this woman was telling me, I have a son who's about your age. And something about me hit her, and something about her hit me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big believer in no coincidences.
Yes.
And here I was a young girl, but I was doing adult things, and I had adult responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And here she was an adult, but clearly she needed someone to speak to. And we became friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, she was in her 30s, maybe 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And here I was young, but she had a son the same age. And so as we talked and walked, she said, oh, whereabout do you live? And I told her, and this was, you know, there was no stranger danger at that, you know,
Right.
it wasn't really anything to be concerned about. I had established she was a normal person. And I told her, and she said, my son and I live on the next street over. And so we, you know, what a small world. So I said, I want you to talk to my mom. My mom was sick. She was going to die, and she was spared. And I believe, you know, you can be okay. And I raced home after school, picked up Dolphin and raced home after school. And I said, Mom, you have to meet this woman. I think you would love her. And so we ended up becoming friends, and we had dinner together, and I became friends with the son, and the two of us kind of healed together through the pain
Right.
of you know, worrying about our mothers and their health.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up not making it, but there was several years of a beautiful friendship that was meant to be. And there were things that she learned from me, from my mom. My mom initially didn't even want to talk to her because she didn't want to revisit that dark place. She said, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about when I was sick. I don't ever want to think about it again. But I think part of her revisiting it and talking to her helped her, and it also helped my mom. And so I'm a big believer that these connections that we make in life,
Mm-hmm.
as insignificant as they may seem in the moment,
Right.
are huge. And
Mm-hmm.
they have effects in our lives and in other people's lives that we don't even recognize in the moment. And we can't fathom. To this day, I may not fully, you know, the effects that it had on her son, and that period that he was able to share with me his fear and concern and worry about his mom, what that may have done and helped him with later in life.
So good.
So,
Good. Yes. And as I mentioned earlier, we're all about the destination, right? And so if you had been in that mode where I've got to get the cat to the vet and get to school, I don't have time to chit chat with these people. And a lot of us are in that space where, we're on to the next thing and the next thing. And oh, I got to check my phone. And we really have missed a lot of opportunities to connect with people one-on-one.
right.
And like you said, I don't believe in coincidences either. And I believe we have divine appointments along the way. God sends people into our path to help us and for us to help them. So Shane, you talked about your mom with your stepdad,
Mm-hmm.
and you share in the book that your parents were divorced when you were fairly early. And you went back and forth a little bit between the two. Sometimes you lived with your dad, sometimes you lived with your mom, sometimes you lived with your grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
I think that happens a lot, and I'm not judging anybody, but it is just a reality in our world today. And
Mm-hmm.
children really need that stability, that safe place within the
Mm-hmm.
family. So if you could take a moment and talk a little bit about that and how that impacted your life.
Um, well, I think my safe place, my stability was always at my grandparents.
Mhm.
Um, I will always look back on the time that I spent with my grandparents as some of my favorite moments. And again, I mean, I think it's all in the way you look at it and its perspective. You know, there are a lot of kids who don't want to spend time with their grandparents. Like it's boring. And oh, I've heard that story before. And oh, I want to hang out with my friends.
Yes.
I cherished the time that I had with my grandparents even before I wouldn't say forced to live with them, but even before I had to live with them,
Mhm.
I cherished the time with them. But when I lived with them, I felt like, in retrospect, then I appreciated it. But even more, as I got older, that I was able to have that time with them and that I could see how they lived and really be in the day-to-day life of what they believed and how they treated people and the kinds of neighbors they were. And so, at my age, I've always felt like I was a much older person. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's because it was, living and being so close to my grandparents, but I'm old fashioned. I believe in respect. I believe in being
Mhm.
kind to your neighbor. I
Okay.
believe that we should all help one another. I believe, that we are all created equal
Mhm.
and that we should all be treated equal. And so I kind of have an old fashioned, according, to culture these days,
Right.
old fashioned view, which
Mhm.
I'm so grateful for.
Yes.
Um, and so I try to instill that in my children. They were hardworking, humble, caring, thoughtful people who, appreciated the little things. There was you were frugal at that time.
Right.
If you wanted to buy something, you stopped and you thought about it. Do you really
Mhm.
need it? And
Mhm.
what was the impact going to be for that purchase? It
Yes.
was it was such a beautiful way. So that was my safe place. And my grandmother every night, um, she we prayed together every night.
Mm.
And even, some nights when it was just now I lay me down to sleep, even if it was just that, it was routine for me.
Yes.
And so I loved it. Living with my mother and I, there's no bond like a daughter and a mother.
Mhm.
Even if it's not healthy or 100% functional,
Sure.
um, there is a bond. And I love my mother and I have incredible respect for my mother. Um, I think she was dealt a lot of things, and I think that as parents, we all do our best. We all try our best. We try to correct the mistakes of the past and you try to improve things for, going forward for your
Mhm.
future children, but we all make mistakes. So I know that she didn't have an easy life. And with her being a single mother,
Yes.
um, she made choices and sometimes they weren't always the best choices, but she did the best she could.
That's
I
right.
guess. And so living with my mother, um, I guess another reason why I was a little more mature and a little older was my mother didn't hold back with me. It didn't matter, my age really. She didn't paint things, with a rainbow brush or look
Right.
through the lens, with rainbow colored glasses. She
Yes.
painted a very true picture of
Mhm.
people and the world. And so, um, I she would share things with me about my father, things that he had done, things that the way that he was. But I was also someone who I I needed to make that determination myself. I wanted to know for myself if that truly was how he was. And so when I did have those moments and opportunities to live with him, one was by choice, one we didn't have a choice. Both times he was exactly as she described. And so, but I had to learn for myself.
Yes.
I had to, and that's all of us, human nature, whether it's children, whether it's just in life, we tend to, so we can ask for advice and we can ask people to tell us things, but we don't always take their advice and we don't always heed
Right.
their warnings.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we go through life and we have to find out the hard way. We have to find out for ourselves. And so I did. Um, but I find that to be a blessing too, because I have no regrets. I can't look back and say, maybe he wasn't what she said. Maybe I should have tried harder. No, I gave everyone a fair assessment, and I gave everyone had equal opportunity to be their true selves.
That's good.
So yeah.
That's good because I think children can kind of fantasize and create these scenarios where it's not reality. And facing reality is not always easy, but it is a necessary part of the journey. And I can definitely relate to what you're saying there, Shane.
Yes.
So in your journey on this road trip that you take us on,
Mhm.
you share that in addition to going back and forth between your parents, you were basically sexually abused by a babysitter. He drugged
Mhm.
you. Um,
Mhm.
you had other challenges. You were eventually uh, asked to leave your father's house because the girlfriend didn't want you there. So you had to
Mhm.
deal with rejection on that. You were terrified that your mom was going to die. Sometimes there wasn't a lot of food. You had to take care of your brother. I'm not trying to, we're not having a pity party here. And I know that
Yeah.
you don't do that.
Right.
But how is it that you you are such an overcomer, you spin things in such a positive way? Because a lot of my guests on the show have had similar experiences and have gotten into drug and alcohol abuse, substance abuse, because they want to numb that pain. They want to forget
Mhm.
those memories that keep replaying. I'm not saying anything against them. I can certainly understand how they would feel that way.
Right.
But what is it about you? What's the secret? Because I think we can learn from this as life gives us hits, whether we're children or adults. And in this upside down world we're living in, sometimes the hits keep coming. How is it that you've maintained this positive attitude throughout the years?
Well, so I've thought about this and I have been asked this before. And so I've put a lot of thought
Mhm.
into it myself because I tend to analyze a lot. I analyze my own behavior. I analyze my own reactions. I don't know that too many people do it enough
Yeah.
because I don't think that people would have as many outbursts or behave as badly as they do sometimes on social media if they analyzed their own emotions first and
Mhm.
addressed, why something's upsetting them. So I tend to do that a little too much at times, and sometimes I need to cut myself a break.
Sure.
But to answer your question, um, I think that we are and we become what we tell ourselves. We can hear other people telling us we're no good, you're not going anywhere, you'll never make it, you're
Mhm.
going to end up, whatever it may be. We can believe what other people are telling us, or we can choose to be what we tell ourselves we're
Mhm.
worth.
Yes.
And so throughout my life, when bad things would happen, I would always say, there has to be a reason why this is happening. There's a reason why this is happening. And I don't know why. I think it was my coping mechanism. I think that, if it happened for no reason, if bad things happen to good people, what's the point?
Right.
I mean, like, what's the point of it all? If no matter how you behave and no matter what you do, no matter how good you are, how much you help people or care, if bad things happen to good people, no matter what's the point? That's defeating. It's a defeating thought.
Sure.
But do you want to live a life where you can put your head down on the pillow and be proud of what you've done and what you've become and who you are to other people, that you've helped someone else?
Yes.
Or do you want to put your head down on the pillow and be ashamed and embarrassed and suffer in pain? And, because that's a vicious cycle that will eat you up.
Yes.
And so my answer is, there's several parts of it. That's one. I spent so much time in my life alone. And in the beginning, that alone time was so scary. There was nothing worse than being alone. I mean, I would sit in an apartment or in my house, and when I was little, and no one would be there, and I was always alone. And so at first I was terrified of it, and I hated it. I hated to be alone. And then as I got older, I started to actually crave that time alone, because it was when I was alone that I did my reflecting, that I was not invited to, I was forced to think about things. I was forced to address things head on, painful or not. I had no choice. I couldn't hide in an empty house. It wasn't going to get me away from my thoughts. And so the other scary thing was, if I'm alone and there's no one to help me, if I do something more to numb the pain, I'm falling further and further in that hole, and eventually no one is going to hear me cry. And so I tried to do everything I could. I would look down the hole and I would think, oh my gosh, like, I'm alone now. But if I fall down that hole, no one's ever going to find me. Then I'm never going to have any help. And so I started to try to, when I would get in that dark, lonely, scared place, instead of trying to numb that pain, I would kind of figuratively and literally, think about that hole and think, if I feel alone now, if I fall down that hole, I'm lost. I'm done. No one is here to help me. But something that maybe I can add that may be important to some of your readers is that, when I was younger, I mean, we all went to school and high school and college. And yes, I mean, did I try, alcohol, and, did I drink with friends? And yeah. And sometimes I would go out and think, oh, I would try to make believe that I didn't have so many adult responsibilities. And I would love to just want to cut loose and just be a normal teenager who didn't have to work 2 jobs and pay rent. And I wished I had those things. But at the end of the day, when my friends went home and they had a home cooked meal and they had a comfy bed and they didn't have to worry about paying for bills, I did. I had to get up the next day and go to work, no matter how I felt. So I learned that way too. But another form of addiction, it's not just substance abuse. It's not just, drug or alcohol, but it's relationship addiction.
Oh yeah.
It's addiction.
Amen.
Yeah. It's addiction to perfectionism. It's addiction to, what do people think of me?
Oh, wow.
And so if you start living your life as though I have to pretend like everything's positive and I'm a happy, happy girl, then you might not be completely fulfilled on the inside if you're not being true to yourself. So while I do practice, because it's a practice, we all have good days and bad days, but every day you have to practice. What are your blessings? What are you grateful for? Because if you look for what you're grateful for, you're going to find it. If you look for all that's bad in the world and all the things that are going wrong, you're going to find it. So it's how you choose to look at things. But, I think especially for, it happens to men too, but I think especially for young women and young girls, you spend your life trying to figure it all out, figure yourself out, who you are, what's your identity? Are you a wife? Are you a mother? Are you this? Or are you Michele? Are you happy, Shane? Are you fulfilled, Shane? Are you at peace, Shane? Are you complacent? Are you, and so I think we get lost in addictions of many kinds.
Absolutely.
And I've had to shake myself up and remind myself that I am here to help others, but I also have to acknowledge that I have a well that needs to be filled. And not every day, it's full, but I have water in it. And I just have to keep making sure that I'm acknowledging and addressing my true motivations, my heart, my refocusing to find the clarity of it all. So
that's good. I love what you said about that, because a lot of people think about what I do and, the book, How to Kill an Addiction. Well, I don't have a substance abuse problem. I don't drink. I've never done drugs and things like that, but it goes way beyond that.
Right.
And you're so right about that. Very good. Very good. Okay. I want to read a little excerpt of the book here. You wrote, "We forget that difficult paths can lead us to rewarding destinations, beautiful views, and enriching experiences. The task is about much more than control. It's about accepting what we can't fix and choosing to be positive and intentional in the things we can manage. We simply have to let go of things, and when we do, we find more power to focus on the things that we can handle, like our actions and attitudes." And that really fits along with what you said earlier, Shane. Your attitude about things, your actions. Would it feel better to get drunk at the party and forget all of your cares? Yes, but your problems aren't going to go away. You're just going to forget them temporarily. And when you wake up the next morning, things aren't going to be better. They're going to be worse. So thankfully, you had a mature view of that, which helped you. So we're going to back up just a little bit. For those of our audience who haven't read the book yet, I mentioned that you were living with your dad. He got a new girlfriend, and the girlfriend wanted you to go. So you kind of were in this position where you either had to go back to New York with your mom, and you didn't want to do that. But you actually became a ward of the court, and you lived on your own. So was that your last year of high school or your last 2 years?
It was the end of my junior year. So it was like a year and a half of being on my own.
You were alone, working 2 jobs, going to school, still getting good grades, still getting awards. And it's just so powerful. But as you were home alone one night, maybe feeling a little bit sorry for yourself that you couldn't be just carefree and go out, hang out with your friends and do what normal high schoolers do. You were home and you had somebody come to your door who was really in a state of emergency. So if you could just take a moment to share that, because I think that's a really good example of what we're talking about here. How even in the seemingly difficult situations, there's light in that darkness.
Yeah, definitely. So I was living in this apartment building, and there was another, I knew quite a few of the residents because it was a very small apartment community, but there was another young person who lived in this apartment building. He was older than me. He had graduated school before me, so he was done. But there was a faint, very, very faint knock on the door, and and it was an unusual hour, and I wasn't expecting anyone. And so I went to the door, and I kind of looked out the peephole, and I recognized who it was. We went to the same high school, but as I said, he was older than me. And I answered the door, and he stood there, and I immediately said, oh my God, oh my God. And I said, what happened? And he didn't say anything. And obviously I knew what happened, but it was just, human nature to just ask. But he stood there, with his arms bleeding because he had slit his wrists. And he just stood there crying. And to this day, I get emotional thinking about it, because he is a very, very, very good friend of mine to this day. But he stood there, and he was just sobbing, and he didn't say anything. And I immediately called the, ambulance, and called 911, and rushed, and they took him off to the hospital. And he survived. He was fine, but in that moment, it wasn't until years later, when I wrote this book. I mean, that moment stayed with me. I knew that he was okay, but I worried about him. I felt this terrible dread that someone could be so lonely or so distressed that they would do that. Yeah. I understood it. I had been distressed, and I had never attempted anything, but I understood that deep, deep, deep pain. I understood that dark place. I know that it's real. But in that moment, it was a beautiful, messy blessing and I found it to be an incredible, I don't even want to say a privilege, but an incredible moment to know that he knocked on my door. And so we lost touch. I knew that he was okay, but we lost touch, and it was before social media and all of that. But I always thought back about that night, and if I hadn't been home, or if I didn't hear that faint knock, or what might have happened. But I always think to myself, we go through life, and every door is an opportunity. Every encounter that we have with someone is an opportunity. And whenever there's a knock on my door, I always open it. I always open it. And that is how I go through life. You have to answer the knocks on those doors, because you don't know what's behind it. So fast forward, he actually wrote something to me, and he gave permission for it to be included in the book, and it's at the very end. Yes. And he wrote me something so beautiful, and he is married, has a beautiful family. He is happy. He struggled with addiction. He is sober and has been for a very long time. And we have a very special, meaningful relationship and connection and friendship that very well could have gone another way.
Yeah.
So
that's so good. And I think that really sums up everything that you're trying to say in the book, and everything that you are today, that there is a silver lining in the clouds. Sometimes we don't see it. Sometimes it takes God a little bit of time for working on us to help us to see that we have those opportunities. And I'm just guessing that he knew that you were a safe place to land.
Yeah.
Through, just like you said, a smile, a conversation, right. And the trials that you had made you a more compassionate person, made you more an empathetic person, because you can relate to the hurts and the wounds of people because of things that have happened on your journey. And so many of my guests have the same testimony. It's like God takes the lumps of coal that the enemy gives us and turns them into diamonds. And then those diamonds help other people.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful process that continues.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I agree 100%.
All right. Well, our time is unfortunately going too fast right now. So I want to give you an opportunity, Shane, to share anything else that you would like our listeners to know, anything about your journey, because It is a journey, and I really have come to respect my own journey, all the good, the bad, and the ugly of it.
Yeah.
I've really come to appreciate the bad too, because it's really the fuel that makes me do what I do, as a coach, as a minister. So in those moments, they weren't pleasant. They were quite painful, honestly, and they were very hard to endure. But now that I'm on the other side of it, I see the value of it, because like you, I have compassion for other people and I have respect for their journey. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Um, well, I just wanted to thank you again for having me and taking this time, because it's an honor to be on this show with you. And I love what you're doing, because the world needs more bright light, especially now. We all need some encouragement, some inspiration, and some positive messages. So thank you. I would just say to anyone who's watching this, it sounds cliche, but it is a message that needs to be repeated and is worth repeating, and that is that you're not alone. No matter what you're going through, your past does not define you. Your present is where the power is, and what you do with the present moment is up to you. It's not up to what happened to you in your past. It's not because of how you grew up. It's not what unfortunate circumstances might be happening. Right now, the power is within you in this present moment, and how we choose to live is a gift. And when we look at how our actions, those ripple effects of our actions, how they affect other people and how they change the course of the future, is pretty awe-inspiring, actually. If we take a moment and slow down, and if it takes 5 deep breaths, if it takes 20, we need them. Spend some time outside. Spend some time reading something positive and inspirational. Take a moment and open up the Bible and read something. It was a game, not a game, but it was something to me. I would just flip through the book, and wherever it landed, that was what I was supposed to read that day. Whatever it might be, sometimes it's a distraction. Sometimes it's a moment that you are well aware you need help. And I'm just telling you that you're not alone. And I am a testament, and that in order to have the testament, you have to have the test. Yeah. And so we use these moments, there's another analogy, something that I write in my book, and that I learned very early on, that you can use rocks one of 2 ways. You can use a rock to let it hold you down and cling onto a rock and drown with it, or you can use a rock to stand on it. And so we all are going through difficulties in many different ways, and in a world that is upside down. And we need to just continue to fill our wells with positive messages and reminders that God is using us. We need to fulfill His purpose. His purpose gave us life, and we endure things to show and teach other people that we're not alone.
Amen. I agree. And I love the rock analogy, and I'm glad you brought it up, because it's in my several pages of notes that I didn't get to talk about, because you've had such an incredible journey, Shane, and there are so many parts of your trip, your road trip, that we didn't get to talk about today. But I encourage everybody to get the book. It's Broken Little Believer, Finding Purpose in All the Pretty Painful Pieces. There it is. It's got such a beautiful cover. And I really commend you on such a beautiful job. Everything about it is spectacular, and I recommend that everybody get the book. It's just a good summer read. I don't know, for some reason, summer, road trips, vacations, music, that's perfect.
And now so many people, we can't afford gas, so just hop in the Volkswagen bus and you can travel with me.
There you go. It's going to be a shorter road trip this year, but
yes, exactly.
I want to read one more little excerpt from the book, Shane, because I just love this. Every single ride has brought me to the place I am today and made me who I am. Each experience has helped shape who I am, how I feel, and what I believe. Because of these journeys, I have gained a better understanding and ability to relate to others who have been on similar adventures. So good. So good. Well, thank you so much, Shane, for taking the
Thank
time
you.
to be our guest today. You're such a light. And I love how God took the broken pieces of your life, put them together into something beautiful that you can now share with the world. And you're doing just that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And again, it was an honor to be here. And thank you for all that you're doing and for having me.
Thank you, Shane. And I want to thank our audience for joining us on this episode of Voices of Recovery. We're creating a safe place where people can go for encouragement on their journey with God. If you're new, please give us a like or follow. And I'd also encourage you to share this out because someone you know needs to hear what Shane has to say today. So God bless you, Shane. Thank you for
God
watching,
bless you.
everyone, and we'll see you next time on Voices of Recovery. Bye-bye.